So a certain nameless person may have just gotten busted with a lot of fake followers on Instagram. Yeah, when you consider everything else that's been going on as of late, that doesn't sound good at all. Oh man, so hey there to all you fine folks on this fine day, by the way. I hope you are doing excellently. One thing before we get started, we have a new comic project coming up very soon. The sign up for that is at the top of the description. Check that out. More on that at the end of the video, and thank you in advance. Now, as far as that certain nameless person's Instagram account is concerned, well, there are a few things here that may just raise the alarm bells. I mean, if you look at this, it has 4 million followers and counting, and yet, when you look at the amount of traffic, especially considering the controversy that has been going on as of late, you're talking about relatively little traffic considering. Look at this post right here, for example, and look at the amount of likes that it has. 74,200. Now, typically, an internet influencer, we're just talking about some random person out there, somebody that doesn't have advertisements, not a connection to a brand like AQUAMAN, they can pull down 2 to 5% every single time they post. That nameless person right here, what are they pulling down? Less than 2%. That, it should be disconcerting. Even on posts like this, posts that should get engagement, because this, it's controversial. Basically, it's that nameless person saying, yeah, I do consume 1 to 2 bottles of wine. You know, that thing that you folks have talked about that was brought up in the courtroom. I'm saying that without really trying to say that. It only garners 152,000 likes, basically around 3.8%. When you have numbers like that, that says that there's some type of problem with the account. And when you start looking into the metrics behind the account, well, let's just say that all of this stuff, it gets the old noggin jogging and then some. I mean, one thing you have to remember, and a lot of people bring up in this conversation, is that people following that nameless person as of late, they're not following because they like that person. Oh no, they're keeping up with everything going on between them and JD. They want to know what's going to happen with Warner. They want to know what's going to happen with AQUAMAN 2. And they want to see posts like, say, I don't know, wine bottles there, for example. Now, when you start examining this from a different perspective, asking the question of how many of those accounts are actually valid. When I say valid, I'm not talking about people that like or dislike that nameless person. How many people just followed that name because they know it from Hollywood? But rather, how many of those accounts are purchased accounts? How many were brought over because of public relations? Yeah, that's when things really, really get interesting. See, if you look at this number up here in the corner, you'll notice fake followers at 23.33% of all of those followers. Now this, it gets really, really interesting when we start talking about this little thing called thresholds. What do I mean by thresholds, by the way? Well, when you look at this number, what is the magic number that determines whether or not this is fraud? If you look at this little information tab here, it says, does this influencer have a real audience? So it's asking whether or not they actually paid for these things or not. And look at this threshold here. More than 25% is typically a sign of fraud. Now, I'm not saying that that nameless person did anything wrong at all, but when you start to look at that number, when you really start to ask questions about it, isn't it interesting that you're only talking about a 1.7% difference? And if you were going to hire on, say, a public relations team, one that was going to boost you up, make you sound like you were important, wouldn't they know about thresholds? Wouldn't they try to get as close to that threshold as they could without going over? Yeah, that stuff, it seems really, really questionable, doesn't it? Now, another thing that I found really, really interesting about this account, pretty much telling, pretty much suspect as well, is the followers over time. We would be talking about the amount of growth, or in this case, the amount of stagnation, the lack of growth. And I mean, it would be troubling and beyond. Now, I want you to look at the followers numbers here, and I want you to remember something. I want you to remember the testimony of one Kate James. That was the former assistant for that nameless person. They talked about that nameless person calling up the paparazzi, telling them they're going to go out and they're going to grocery shop. What does that mean? That means that these numbers, they matter. And if the numbers, they're going like this, yeah, what would they do to maintain the facade that things, they're going well? If you look at 02 2021 and compare that with 03 2021, you'll notice something really interesting. They actually lose followers over that timeline. They go from 3,905,000 to 3,899,000, and you would expect that trend to stay around, wouldn't you? Here, though, you notice a reversal of that, and well, the numbers, they actually start climbing upward. Crazy enough, they don't actually mirror talks about things like AQUAMAN 2, things that are going on with Warner. You just have a growth here. And really, when you think about it, there's not a lot of explanation to it. Now, what makes these numbers even crazier is when you look on the worst offender list. When I say the worst offender list, they're adding in actresses, they're adding in social media influencers, looking at the number of fake accounts that are following them. Well, number one, it's not terribly off of that nameless person. We're talking about 16.7%, but you'll notice something. Once you start sliding down towards, I don't know, the median range, when you get down toward the middle here, you'll notice how close that gets. And well, by the time that you get to number 25, again, number 25, the worst of the worst when it comes to fake followers, they're only a few percentage points off of that nameless person. That should say something to people. Now, to close this out, I really want to put that number into perspective. Why? Because 23.33%, that sounds really bad, right? But if I actually put a number to it, if I were to tell you 933,200 accounts actually had to be taken out, yeah, I mean, that really sounds bad, right? That really gives you some perspective. You also have to consider that this is the person that Warner Brothers decided they would go to bat for. They decided that this person over a superstar known worldwide was the person they wanted in their movies. Yeah, I mean, really, that gets the old noggin jogging, doesn't it? But anyway, let me know what you think about this stuff. And as always, I appreciate the heck out of you. You make this stuff work, so thank you. That link that I mentioned in the description, by the way, that's for our new comic book. It's coming up soon. Check that out. I mean, we can complain about what these companies do all the time, or we can go out and we can try to do something ourselves. That's what we're trying to do. Join us with that. But yeah, thank you for being here too. I appreciate the heck out of you. And until next time, let me end by saying see you soon. And again, thank you.